Welcome to the Parenting Coach Podcast with Crystal. Over 7 years ago, I felt like I was stuck in this cycle of yelling and reactivity in my parenting that I did not want to be in, but I didn't know how to get out of. I knew how I wanted to parent pretty much exactly, and I'd spent hours reading books, but not finding a way to show up how I wanted to. That's when I started to turn inwards. My own inward journey was what my family needed. As I changed, everything around me changed. My kids' meltdowns decreased by 90% or more with no medications or therapy. I stopped yelling, sibling fighting became almost entirely non-existent, and I found that this change flowed into other areas of my life too. My intuition increased. I started to run my life and business in a very different way. If this sounds like something you want to, I can help. Join me each week as I share my journey, including the laughter, fun, hard times, and tears. Tune in for support, guidance, and fun conversations with my favorite experts, and really anything else that interests me too. Hello, and welcome to the podcast. It's crazy that we only have a few episodes left. It's kind of blowing my mind, but it's also awesome. And I was interviewed on somebody else's podcast. It hasn't aired yet. It's on the Simplify podcast. So one day you'll be able to listen to it. But my friend Jade was kind of asking about parenting. And she was like, but I've tried this and I've done this and I've read this book and all of the things. And she's like, I keep using all these different tactics and they just aren't working. And that is exactly how I used to feel as well. And so what I explained to her is what I'm going to explain again today. And I've talked about in the podcast before, but we often kind of know how we want to parent. We don't really need the books to tell us how. We kind of have a pretty good idea. I want you to think about like getting healthy, like your body. People pretty much know what that looks like. They know they probably need to drink more water. Probably they need to move their body in some way, probably eating whole foods, getting good sleep. Like we all kind of know, like you don't have to like go to a nutritionist and get all of these specifics and details and information, like to eat healthier, to be healthier, to move your body more. Like we all kind of have that innate knowledge within us. Parenting is similar. When we're not blocked by all the things that we are blocked by, which is what this episode is going to be about, we parent pretty well. We kind of know that connection matters, that relationship matters, that our kids' opinions matter, that our intuition matters. Like there's a lot that we pretty much know on the insides without having to read books or have somebody outside of ourselves tell us that. But what's actually blocking us from being able to do this is our triggers. When I use the word trigger, which I don't love, I wish there was a different term. The only other term I can think of is emotional activation or inflammation. So in me, it feels like the bubbling up of some strong, big feelings inside. That's what a trigger is. That those triggers are what's blocking us from accessing the parental wisdom that we already have. We already know how we want to show up as parents pretty much, but what's really blocking us is our triggers. So today's episode is called Encounters. Triggers as teachers. Because for me, that is the thing that has helped me change my parenting. It wasn't reading any of the books or taking any more of the courses or using any of the mantras. It was accessing the emotional activation within myself and doing the healing necessary through that helped me change my relationship with my kids and my relationship with everything else. I believe that our relationship has to do with our thoughts and with our identity and with our feelings. And I think we have a relationship with our partners. We have a relationship with our friends. We have a relationship with our kids, but we also have a relationship with things like wealth, with our body, with our home. And so my relationships with everything in my life changed, not just my parenting. I'm going to talk a little bit about what that looks like. And then I'll also give you some exercises that you can start with, how we can actually start digging into what these triggers are and using them as teachers like they are. I imagine them as a door. There's this spiritual classroom that we're being invited into. It's a door that's opening into the classroom. And it's like, are you going to come in the room or are you going to keep closing the door? Are you going to come in the room and are you going to keep closing the door? And the more that you close those doors, the more loudly those triggers are going to speak out at you. It's probably going to affect your sleep. It might lead to anxiety or depression. It could lead to physical symptoms as well in your body, disease in your body. We can keep shutting those doors or we can open them. And I'm not going to lie, there's several times where I'm like, I'm not willing to open this door right now. I know that there's a door there and I'm going to look at that later because it doesn't feel like the right timing for me, or I'm just not willing to. And sometimes I wait quite a long time before I decide to open the door on that trigger, on that spiritual classroom, because I know that there is a gift inside. I know that I always will eventually get there because I've seen the gift and I've seen myself be able to grab that gift, to move through it, to release that classroom and move on to the next one. And it's been a beautiful journey, but also it's difficult and it's hard. Learning is circular. And so I think that we learn over and over and over again. We learn the same things. Life is seasonal. It's just like nature. When you think about seasons, they come and they go and they come back again and they go again. Even if you watch nature, it's very circular. It's very cyclical. Learning is the same thing. With every turnaround, we're learning something newer or deeper or with a slightly different flavor. It's learning the same lessons over and over again, but usually to a different depth or a little bit in a different way. And so if you're feeling like, I already dealt with this, why is it coming back up again? Just remember the seasons. Remember that it is seasonal, that it's coming back again. It's going to go away. It's going to come back again, but in a slightly different depth or with a slightly different flavor, slightly different gift that you might get from that same trigger room. And over time, you'll notice that your triggers, those emotional activations, will be less frequent and much less intense. So much less intense that sometimes you can actually move through it in the moment. And sometimes so much less intense that you can actually pause and respond in a more intentional way, or pause and not respond at all. But when I first was triggered, before I did this work, there was no pause between stimulus and response. If you've heard of that quote by Viktor Frankl, there's a pause between stimulus and response. And in that pause lies our growth and freedom. This is what I believe my coaching to be. My coaching is increasing that pause. My coaching for my own self, for my clients, for you listeners, that's what I'm hoping for, is increasing that pause over and over and over again until the pause is great, until I can really stop, until I can really go through and release and move through what's happening within me and respond in the way that I want to. I also shared this on my friend Jade's podcast, but I believe it's congruence that we're looking for. We know in our mind consciously how we want to show up and who we are. And we feel who we are in our soul at like a spiritual, deep level. We know who we are. We feel that inside of ourselves. And we're trying to align these two things. But sometimes we can believe something consciously, but not actually be there subconsciously, right? We can have changed our beliefs about parenting or about ourselves or whatever on a conscious level, which is what I think sometimes books or podcasts or articles or mantras can do for us. But if we haven't done the subconscious healing part, that is the part that's triggered. That's the part that really rules the whole world, really, is our subconscious mind. And so if we're not accessing the wisdom that's there and changing our practices there, doing the healing necessary there, then we're going to constantly be finding this incongruence between our body and our mind, our conscious and our subconscious. And so I believe that coaching, I believe this work is finding that congruence again. And I don't even know if it's called coaching anymore. Sometimes I feel like, is this even coaching? I don't even know what the word would be. It feels a little bit more like I'm not a coach anymore. I'm definitely cheering you on. I'm definitely believing in you. But my space is really co-regulation, me holding emotional energy for you, believing that you hold the answers, not me, and helping you to find those answers. And also that sometimes healing looks very different. You might think that it's going to lead you one way and it takes you somewhere different. And so it's not like that action-based coaching of like, let's get you where you want to go. It's like, wait a second, where do we really want to go? Because our spiritual wholeness, which is what we work on here, might take us on a very circuitous path that might take us down a very different road than what we consciously thought we wanted. So I'm going to share a little bit to start off with what healing looks like. Here's some examples of healing in my life, in the lives of my clients, and lives of people that I know as they've gone through this work. One is intuition. You'll notice as you heal, you often stop asking outside of yourselves for answer. You're not constantly calling your friends or reading or scrolling social media or asking on all these other platforms. You're not like, what do I do with my life? How do I, whatever the decision is that you're trying to make, whatever the solution is that you're trying to find, you know that the answer doesn't lie outside of yourself, but it lies within yourself. You don't second guess yourself as much. And obviously healing isn't perfection, but you'll notice that you feel more confident in yourself and your answers and who you are. You'll notice that you don't feel triggered or activated very much anymore. I remember in the past that I would be really activated in conversations when people would have different opinions than I would, political opinions, religious opinions, opinions about anything really that I like, even if I didn't respond negatively, inside I felt quite activated by that. I don't feel that way anymore. I can be around people that are very different, that have very different belief systems than I do. And I am listening to them. I'm open to understanding them. I'm open to having conversations. And I'm knowing that this will be healthy and helpful for me. I think that healing also looks like having really connected and intimate relationships with your partner, with your kids. When it comes to your partner, that you feel safe because you feel safe within your own self. You don't have that codependency of my needs are all boiled up into your needs and my self-worth is outside of myself in you. And I need you to meet my needs and to make me feel better. I think that sometimes the way that we promote therapy and coaching and self-help can be very codependently breeding, like it can add more codependency. Instead of separating that piece of me that's like me and my value and my self-worth and my safety and my security is within me. And then I bring that sense of safety to my relationship. Again, less triggered in my relationships as well, and knowing how to move through those triggers when I can acknowledge them and be aware of them. I also feel like we feel more trust with money, with business, with decisions that we make around money and business, more confident in ourselves. And I think that parenting changes as well. I think for me, obviously years ago, I talked about this in depth on the podcast in the beginning of all of the years that I was a very big rager, very big yeller, and that has changed, and not because I tried focusing on it, but because it changed over time as I did this work. And by this work, I mean this trigger work that I'm talking about now. That is what changed things so much for me and so much for my kids. And I noticed their behavior changing as well. And I feel like I've moved beyond it to what I talk about in my past episode of intuitive parenting a couple episodes ago. That also changed hugely for me as well. And that being able to trust myself and also trust my kids and trust their journey and their path. So that is what healing looks like for me. And I think that healing often feels uncomfortable. It can sometimes feel a little bit isolating because you notice how different you are. You notice how different you are from maybe your friends or your family or from who you used to be. And it can feel a little bit separating. But I also feel like it's the place where we can truly be connected to people because I don't have to change myself or mask who I am. I'm just able to be me. The reason that I called this episode Encounters is because I was reading Raising Critical Thinkers by Julie Bogart. I also highly suggest you go listen to that episode. She talks about encounters being meeting with the adversary. That's kind of the general definition, is meeting with an adversary. And that as you do, you gain insight. That's what she talks about in her chapter on encounters, is gaining more insight. And that it can be really uncomfortable to do, but over time we gain more insight. And as I read that, I was like, this is what healing is. It's an encounter with our own inner adversary, with our own inner insides that are spewing out all of this shame thoughts within us that is making us feel inflamed. And as we meet with that adversary, as we welcome it, as we allow it, as we step into that spiritual classroom, then we get the gift from it. Then we get the insight from it. Then it can become our teacher. So that is the work that we're doing. That is what healing can look like in the future. And as we choose to do this work, then we can use it to help ourselves, but also help other people. I think that our influence increases over the people close to us. We're able to kind of spread that healing as we do that healing as well. So I would offer to do this work if you're feeling triggered in your relationship with money, or with your partner, or with your kids, whether or not you're like well at the end of your rope, or if you're like, I can tell that there's triggers here. Maybe it's not impacting me hugely, but it's there. More connection is possible for you, more relationship, more love, more abundance, more healthy experiences are available to you as you do this work. And you can do this work alone. You can listen to these episodes. You can do everything that I talk about on my podcast. You can go back and start at podcast number 1 and do all of this work. Or you can work with me. That is what I do, both in group and individually, and I will be here for it. And even though I am not doing parenting coaching specifically, I will be coaching on shame. I will be helping move to What I believe is that shame is on the one side of the coin. And then once we can move that and we get to the other side, it's intuition and it's manifestation and it's confident living and it's creating beautiful things, a beautiful life. And that is what I coach and work with people on now, guide people through now. And I'm open for that as well. So feel free to send me an email at crystal@coachcrystal.ca if you want to chat more about that. Okay, so here's a couple of exercises that you can do to kind of uncover what triggers are there. And like I said, healing is cyclical, it's circular. So I'm never like, wow, I never have anything to learn. I've just arrived. I'm there. I'm perfect. I've transcended. I'm always asking, like, what's next for me? Like, is there something here that I need to look into? I'm using it as that gift. And remember, like I said before, sometimes I don't open that spiritual classroom door. Sometimes I just like let it remain closed for a while until I want to circle back and I'm ready for that. And that might be you as well. So you can ask yourself, what healing is next for me? What do I feel coming? And what do I feel like is present for me right now? And that I'm willing to kind of open myself up to. Okay. So number one is what's under the trigger. Now, so in that moment when I was feeling really activated in a situation where somebody else had a different opinion than me, underneath that trigger is really I'm right and you're wrong, or you're wrong, you're right and I'm wrong. And because I'm wrong feels like shame, it feels terrible in my body. And so I want to make sure that I'm not wrong. That's why it feels so bad. Look at the current political climate, the current opinion climate. There's so much divisiveness that is very much like black and white. Like it has to be this way or that way. Most answers aren't just black and white. They're not usually just this way or that way. They're usually a lot more in the gray scale. They're usually a lot more in the nuance space in the middle of that. But what's really blocking me from being able to access that insight and understand more deeply, which is what she talks about in Raising Critical Thinkers, is our own triggers. Because as I'm triggered, then I'm going to be moving to usually control or apathy. Control being like, I'm going to figure this out, or apathy being like, oh, there's nothing I can do about it. There's three ways in which we usually respond to triggers. One is blame and defensiveness. Another one is people pleasing. And another one is shutting down and withdrawing, either emotionally or physically. And so I can notice that I'm triggered through my response, or I can notice that I'm triggered as I feel. And I also can notice I'm triggered because there's a couple things that I've noticed are the same between every trigger. One is it feels like there's a problem that's really urgent that has to be solved right now. So if I'm feeling that urgency of like, this is a huge problem, I have to solve it right now, I know like, okay, I'm feeling activated. So it's actually an energy problem. I actually want to get into my body and move through my body right now instead of trying to solve the problem. So triggers are interesting because there's always something underneath it. It's not just like, oh, she has a different opinion than I do about this. It's like, what does that mean about me? If I'm wrong, what meaning am I attaching to that about myself? I'm going to share a couple that I shared on Instagram that are triggers in parenting, but you can be triggered by lots of different things. And I like to ask myself that question: what's really bothering me about this? What meaning am I attaching to this? Or what am I making this mean about me? Those are some of the questions I ask myself to dig into my own triggers. So this is what I shared on Instagram just recently. When your toddler screams and cries and you try to respond with compassion and care, but your insides are actually screaming too, it could be a trigger from your own childhood in which you felt ignored or unsupported in your feelings, and you were told to bottle them up or pretend them away. There's some meaning that you're attaching to that. When your tween refuses to listen to you, it could be bringing up moments of your own past where you felt like you didn't matter or you weren't important. And the inflammation is coming up to guide you to sit with those feelings. Again, there's some meaning that we're attaching to that. When your teen isn't living the life the way you taught them and they're asserting their own autonomy, it might be bringing up your inner teen that wasn't allowed freedom and was forced to comply in order for you to sit with that part of you that desires freedom now. Again, what meaning are we attaching to our teen's behavior? When your adult children are living in a different value system than you raised them in, it might be bringing up your own feelings of pressure to comply or feelings of guilt around thinking differently than your family and friends. And I added this also on Instagram: what will you choose, healing or perpetuating those unhealed parts? So we always have that choice. Am I going to open up the spiritual classroom, or am I going to remain triggered? And even if I'm not doing the blame defensive thing and I'm not like spewing my words back at somebody, I still can be spewing my energy at them. I can still be perpetuating those unhealed parts in ways that are seen and unseen. So number one is to dig into the triggers. You can even write down all the things that triggered you that day. If there's a specific person in your life that you're dealing with, that you have a really hard relationship with, you can be writing down all of those things that trigger you. You can hang out with them for a day and like have a little notebook and be like, hey, this, and then this, and then this. And you can go back through and be like, wait, what meaning was I attaching to this? Because usually the meaning is pretty similar. The meaning usually boils down to a few core beliefs. Usually something around not enoughness, something around not belonging or not being loved, not being seen, not being heard. Something like that is going to be the real root of the trigger. Now, as much as I love to do that work, just because I can like open up my mind and be like, wow, I had no idea that that was the thing. And I love to gain insight that way. What I find is even more beneficial is digging into the feeling in my body. Because I have that thought or that belief that's kind of outside there, but it's also attached like a kite string inside to the energy in my body. So I want to sit with the actual feeling in my body as well. I can sit with it like a shape or an image. I can sit with it like it's an inner child, like at a certain age. And I just want to sit with the energy of the feeling there. And every time I try to go back into my mind, I'm just going to drop back into my body again. The other way that I can kind of uncover where my triggers might be is I'm going to, I can focus on a certain person if it's easier, but I'm going to write down all of the things that bother me about other people. Like, I hate it when my sister does this or when my husband does this. And like, I can write down all of the things that really bother me about them. And you really want to go to town. In fact, in any of this work, I think one of the most important ingredients, so to speak, would be radical honesty. The more radically honest that I can be in these experiences, the more depth I'm going to go to and the more healing I'm going to be able to go to as well. So I really encourage you to be honest with this. I love to rip them up afterwards or to throw them away or to burn them, like whatever feels good to you. But I'm going to write down all the things that bother me about other people. And then on the other half of the page, I'm going to go through each of those one by one and notice, how am I resisting that same thing in myself? Or how does that same thing show up in myself? How am I also like that? Now, this is going to be likely a highly uncomfortable exercise for you. It definitely was for me. I had a person in my life that I felt like was very passive aggressive, and I just hated it so much. And I remember chatting with my husband at the very beginning of my coaching journey and being like, I just hate that they're so passive aggressive. And I was like, I had read something about how the things that bother us about other people are the things that bother us about ourselves. And I was like, I'm not passive aggressive at all. And he kind of like snorkel laughed. And I was like, wait, am I? And he was like, and I was like, I am. And in that moment, like it's interesting because I didn't have the awareness before. I didn't even notice. I actually didn't. Like, it might seem silly that I hadn't noticed this about myself, but I hadn't noticed it about myself. And I really was. Like, that was actually one of my very strong go-to responses to people. Not just this one person in my life, but a lot of people in my life. And so that was an interesting insight to me, was like, wait, if I don't like this in this other person, how am I doing this in myself also? And that awareness, again, really helps. But again, the deeper awareness is going to be the feeling in my body of the thing. So if there's a belief that is there that's kind of stuck inside of me, one of those not enoughness type beliefs, I'm going to go and sit with that feeling and allow it to be there, allow it to be present, and move through it. One of the things that I think about when I think about encounters is contrast. That what we don't want often teaches us, right? Like, that's that same experience some people call the shadow work. It's because there's a shadow side and a light side. And we dig into the shadow side because there's a gift in the shadow side. It's keeping us safe somehow. It has a purpose somehow. There's a gift there. There's some meaning there that we can gain as we encounter the adversary, as we encounter the shadow. The shadow is necessary for our own growth. The shadow is necessary in order for us to gain insight. The contrast is necessary to show us what it is that we don't want. Some of the journaling prompts I've been playing around with lately are digging into, how is this thing that seems so obviously only bad actually good? And this has been breaking my brain a little bit. I don't even remember if I already shared this on the podcast. So if I did, forgive me. But there's an example that I want to share about judgment. I was seeing somebody else get coached on their own judgment and their judgment of somebody else. And what came about when they were being coached on this wasn't that they were an awful person and that's why they were judging, but the judgment was actually showing them how they didn't want to be. They were talking about somebody that was really wealthy that lived close to them. And they were like, that's not the kind of wealthy person that I want to be. I do want more wealth, but I don't want to be like that. Judgment was actually showing them what they don't want. We usually think of judgment as a negative thing. We don't want to judge other people. It's mean, it's unkind. We should just stop judging people. But what if judgment actually also had a gift? What if it was telling you a way that you don't want to be? Not that the other person is wrong or terrible and that they should change and all of those things, but what is it telling you about you? And after this experience that I had, watching this person be coached and kind of move through this, and I could really tell that they were shifting, I was like, wait, where am I doing this in my life? How are my mistakes or my failures or my judgment or my blame or my defensiveness actually good? What did they teach me? How are they good for me? And I also put this in extra because it felt like a double deepness. How is it also good for the world? How is it also good for the other person? Like, obviously I can go to the like, how is it really bad for them part? I already know all of that. But like, could it actually have been good in those moments? What came from that as well? And again, this is a very brain-breaking activity. If you're into stuff like this, I mean, you probably are if you're listening to my podcast, but that is the depth that I love to go to is, can I go to the shadows? Can I go to the heavier side? Can I go to the adversary? And can I encounter it and come back with greater insight and come back completely changed? When Julie talks about encounters and raising critical thinkers, that is the gift, is that it changes you. It changes who you are. That depth and that insight changes you as a person in a way that other things can't to that same depth. And this is the depth that I hope to get to with my own work. So I invite you and encourage you to do a little audit yourself. Where is healing necessary for you? Where is there still a tiny little portion of something that doesn't quite fit right, that you'd like to be open to receiving even more love or abundance or connection or easefulness in? And let's go into that area. Let's tap into those triggers. Let's tap into that shadow work. And let's figure out what that contrast is actually teaching us and what gift there is in that. I hope that this has been helpful for you. This is the work that I do myself, journaling every single day, meditating, pondering, thinking on. And this is what I help others do as well. And if this is something that interests you, I would love to have you reach out, and we will schedule a little chat and see if it's a good fit. You can email me at crystal@coachcrystal.ca. And again, thank you for being here. And I totally forgot, I should have shared this in the beginning, but I have an announcement that has nothing to do with this episode. But I am excited to announce that I am doing a new podcast. It is going to launch on June 2nd, and it is going to be called The Art of Shame-Free Living. It is going to be very different than this one. It's going to be short, bite-sized, 5-minute-ish episodes, and I'm not going to be doing any interviews. It will just be me and my thoughts from whatever is happening that week in my own work and in the work and lives of my clients, that is insightful, that is like this, that is encountering, that is deep, that is us meeting with our own inner adversary. And I'm excited to share that with you. I'm hoping that the link will be up by the time this airs. So head over to the show notes, and I would love for you to follow, subscribe, listen to the trailer. Let me know what you think. Let me know if you're excited about it, and share it with others if you are as well. Again, thank you for being here for my podcast journey, and only a couple episodes left, and then we will wrap this up and start something new. If you enjoyed this episode as much as I did, I would love for you to help spread the word by getting this message of support and guidance out to as many people as possible. So text it to your best friend or tag me on Instagram and share it. Leave a review, rate it, subscribe it, or follow on your favorite platform. Send me a DM on IG letting me know which parts have impacted you or what you'd like to see on future episodes. We'll see you next week.